All right, we want to welcome you to UNT Percussion's 10 Questions Plus tonight with Raynor Carroll. We're so honored and humbled to have Raynor with us tonight to speak about not only orchestral percussion, but his experience as a composer, as an author, and also doing extraneous work in the LA area, film school, film recording, all kinds of activities. And he's done it all, and that's why we're so excited. The students will get a chance to speak with him tonight. My dear colleague, Christopher Deane, who heads our orchestral program here at North Texas, will be the MC tonight. He's got the best MC voice in the house here. And Chris and I have been teaching together since 1992. So just such an honor to have him lead this session tonight. And so, Chris, I'm going to let you introduce Raynor, okay?
All right, it's my great pleasure to introduce Raynor Carroll to all of you. And we were just comparing notes that 41 years ago we actually traveled together to Europe in an orchestra, and I still have very vivid and fond memories of my experiences working with him. And I didn't know that he was going to become one of the megastars that he is, but
Ah,
I might have sensed that through his playing because he was a significant player even then, and it was clear that his path was going to be a very powerful one. He spent 33 years as the principal percussionist of the Los Angeles Philharmonic. He retired in 2016, I believe.
yes,
That was it. Um, and he's had a very, a stellar teaching career as well as that, having taught at many universities in the area: California State University of Los Angeles, University of Southern California, Los Angeles Music Academy, California State University Long Beach, and it looks like you recently retired from the University of California, Los Angeles.
that's correct.
Retirement has been serving you well, but his activities have been multifold, and I think for me to go on about it, probably I wouldn't present it in nearly the kind of light that it should be, but worked with virtually every important conductor of the latter part of the 20th into the 21st century. That alone is something to really laud. Working with these folks has got to be somewhat of a challenge, and maybe there will be time for you to discuss that at some point here.
Sure.
But he's also active in lots of different ensembles still, I believe. Are you still with the Sphinx Symphony? Is this
Yes,
okay?
yes, we're.
So hopefully you'll have a moment that you can talk about that. And then there's the, let's see, Chineke?
Shineke.
Chineke, okay, orchestra. And that's an orchestra in Europe
Yes.
made up of black and minority ethnic musicians. So this is so wonderful to hear that these kinds of things are taking place. But I think, unless there's anything else you would like me to mention about you, sir, I think maybe we can just progress forward. But if you wanted to give any introductory comments before questions come at you, I'd be delighted to have you do that.
Well, I just like to say thank you, Chris, and thank you, Mark, for inviting me here. It's an honor for me to be with you, and I look forward to answering questions from the students.
All right. Well, great. Well, then I think we can just go ahead and get started now. I didn't see if Kailey Filben, are you out there somewhere?
Yes, I am. I'm here.
Very good, very good. Good to see you. Kailey Philbin is a sophomore, very gifted young player. We're really happy that she's here with us. And she's going to ask you the first question.
Hi, Mr. Carroll. Thank you so much for coming to this. It's really an honor to have you here. So my question for you is, when playing in the Los Angeles Phil, you performed under the direction of many famous and amazing conductors. So did you have any really memorable experiences with those conductors, and who were some of your favorites?
Thank you, Kaylee. Many great experiences. It's just a blessing when I look back over my career to do what I was able to do, be a member of an orchestra, which was my dream, and to look back and wow, it was 33 years. It went by so fast. I mean, the drop of a hat and it's done. It's like I've been retired now 5 years, and it seems like a year ago. But I was really blessed to work with a lot of fantastic musicians on stage and off, and fantastic music directors and guest conductors. I would say amongst them, my first season, I believe we did a tour to New York and playing at Carnegie Hall with Simon Rattle. He was not Sir Simon Rattle at the time. He was just Simon Rattle. Would be definitely one of my first amazing experiences. Soon after that, we did a Pierre Boulez festival in Los Angeles with Boulez conducting, and he's just an amazing conductor. I mean, he can conduct in two different times. One hand's up in 4 and the other hand's in 5/8 or whatever. Has a fantastic ear, and we did a whole month of concerts with him where they would pair a classic French piece, let's say Debussy La Mer, with one of his compositions. So very interesting juxtaposition of the two. Let's see. I can remember also doing a Mahler symphony at Walt Disney Concert Hall. And if you haven't been to Disney Concert Hall, it's an amazing place. But in the back, above the highest seats in the back of the auditorium, is basically very open windows. And I remember doing Mahler second. I believe Esa-Pekka was conducting, and there is a moment in the last movement where it opens very stormy and all kinds of things. Both timpanists are going back and forth, and there's all this noise going on. I remember looking up, and there was thunder and lightning happening, and that was it's a moment I'll never forget, because I think that's what Mahler had in mind. If he was able to write to God and say, have a bolt come down, that was it too. And I would add one more experience, probably my last season. I did a bolero with Rafael Frubic de Burgos as the conductor. And the reason it sticks out is that at rehearsal, we started, I'm playing very soft, 3 Ps, I think, and he stops and he says, more. Okay, I'll play a little bit more. So we start again. I play a little bit stronger. The flute comes in. After a few measures, he stops and he says, no, flute, follow him. I was like, oh, yes. Finally, after all these years, a conductor that actually respects what we do. And, the flutist and oboe, they can do their solo, but they should actually be in time with what we do, because we're the timekeepers. And it was one of those moments that I said, wow, where has he been all my career? So that's just a few of the moments that still stick out in my mind. But great question, Kailey.
Thank you very much.
Great. That's great. Well, I got to play a Harianos under that conductor once, and again, it was really pleasant with the orchestra. So that was Cincinnati.
Yeah.
All right. Our next student is a freshman, Trinity McHellen, and she's. Are you there, Trinity?
Yes, I am.
Oh, very good. So Trinity, go ahead and ask Mr. Carroll your question.
Hi, Mr. Carroll. It's an honor to meet you, and I'm glad you're here with us tonight. My question is, what was it like learning from Mitchell Peters, and what was the most important lessons he taught you?
Hi, Trinity. Thank you for your question. What could I say? Mitchell Peters, before I met him, he was a legend, and I was fortunate enough to study with him, and he became my mentor in all of its true sense. And then I was fortunate enough to be co-principal with him for the length of my career until he retired. Such a consummate gentleman, musician, author, composer, all the things I want to be, was Mitchell Peters. And what I learned from him, there's not enough time to tell you all of the things. And when you study with someone, you see them a lot, and you work with them, but when you work with somebody on stage, I mean, I saw him more than I saw my family, because we work like 6 days a week, And so I got to know him well. He knew me, and we just fit together very well. We're both very laid back. Uh, so he taught me what he taught me, or some of the important lessons that he taught me were about music, but I would say it's even more about how you carry yourself, how you live your life, uh, how you check your ego, how you're humble, how you're respectful to other people. I would say that's first and above everything else. But of course, he taught me how to stick Porgy and Bess and a good dynamic for Lieutenant Kijé and all those important things. But I think it's just the man himself. He taught me how to be a man. I always speak with his family and tell them that he was my second father.
I'm sure he would be very honored for you to say that about him. So that's great. Thank you, Trinity. That was a great question. Next, Ladarius Bailey Hunt. He's a freshman, and he has a question for you as well.
Hello. What inspired you to create your publishing company?
Uh, Thank you for the question, Ladarius. This is a good segue from the last question. Uh, just being a student of Mitchell Peters and all of the publications that he has, it was a good segue for me and very inspirational for me to be studying with him and to be using his books. And I've always had an interest in composition, and even more so, I've had an interest in how music appears on the page, if you know what I mean. Not just the clean part, but how it lines up. To me, the printed page of a music is a piece of art too, and I've always been interested in that. So I forget exactly when, but when Finale came out, I got my computer, I got the program, and I started printing out whatever, and that kind of led to Batterie Music with teaching. I mean, I use a lot of Mitch Peters material. Obviously, I use the Cerrone books, Goldenberg, etc. But I would find certain students needed certain things that I couldn't readily find, so I just write things. So over the years, I ended up putting some things together, and that's basically how the timpani book came out. But again, it's all an inspiration from my teacher, Mitchell Peters. Very good question. Thank you.
Could I just ask a little follow up to that particular question, which is getting the rights to publishing a lot of this music, the Messiaen? I mean, we use your books, they're all over the place at UNT. How much of a challenge was this to do all of that research? Because I know publishers are not very responsive to questions from those of us in the playing profession.
Yeah, that was the most difficult part. And I did that at the end after I had decided what I wanted to put in the volumes. I would obviously send out requests for copyright and have to pay the fee, et cetera, et cetera. And it took not days, not weeks, many months for some of them to reply. Some were very good and got right back to me, but some of them took a while. So that was the difficult part in timing out. And of course, Batterie Music is basically, you're looking at Batterie Music. I don't have a separate division that does this and that. I mean, I have a distributor, which is basically Carl Fisher, Theodore Presser, but I do all the actual writing, the printing, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that was the most difficult part, getting the copyrights for most of the books, all of the repertoire books. Most of them have copywritten or copyrighted material. There are a few, that are older, Scheherazade, et cetera, which you don't need a copyright for. But those that did, that was the major thing to cross over to get the permission.
And I'm sorry.
Chris, you are now muted.
Okay.
There you are.
There again. I'm sorry. So I just wanted one more little teeny question of mine, and then I'll be quiet and let the students continue. But it's in the related thing. Is there anything you're working on now that is destined for publication?
Yeah, there is. I have a lot of free time, and like I mentioned earlier, I put together a lot of the material that I had written for timpani in my timpani book. Well, I have a lot of material for snare drum, so there will hopefully, knock on wood, this year be a rather fat snare drum book coming out. It's kind of like a companion to the timpani book, more or less. Exercises, etudes, some repertoire.
That's good to know. We will all be looking forward to that, I promise.
Thank you.
Okay, well, our next questionnaire is Brandon Topolski. He's a senior. So, Brandon, are you there? Brandon? Anybody see him on here? Well, we may have to skip over him. Maybe he'll check in.
Well, he's here. He's listed up here, so maybe he doesn't say he's muted. So, but we can go to the next one. You're right.
Oh, I mean, I see him. Brandon, maybe, are you there, Brandon? Hello? I see you. He's not. Okay, you're muted now. All right.
Wait, hold on. He's gonna come do it from my computer.
Oh, okay. Nice to have roommates.
Sorry, my mic was not working.
Yeah.
Okay, my question was, how did you remain so consistent on a day-to-day basis for performances? And if something were to alter your routine, how would you adjust for that?
Thank you, Brandon. Very good question. People that know me will tell you I'm rather organized. So I would say that was definitely an asset in my day-to-day routines. Always well planned out, always looking far ahead because that's what you have to do. Some things that would bump me out of my routine, in particular, to give you an example, is touring with the orchestra. Because we have our set schedule and, we can do this and that while we're at home. But on the road, one difference for the percussionists is that we don't have access to our instruments. I mean, other than a practice pad. But the LA Phil is known for doing contemporary pieces, but we tour with them also. So quite often, I'd say just about every tour, we were doing some crazy, well, shouldn't say crazy, but very involved percussion pieces. And it'd be great, to have a marimba in your hotel room to warm up, play that lick a few times, but no, you couldn't do that. So I would say that's where it altered my routine of at home, I can just run through the lick a few times, go down to the hall, warm up, practice in the percussion room. You're not able to do that on tour. You don't have access to your instruments until perhaps just before the concert. Sometimes they're traveling on trucks and they just get there just in time, so there's no time to literally practice in the afternoon or whatever. But I think the bottom line is you need to be prepared with the music. The better you know the music, the less it really matters that you're playing on an instrument that is not the same or you haven't touched the instrument in 2 or 3 days. So I hope that kind of answers your question in number one, be organized, and number two, be as prepared as you can.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. All right, the next question comes from I-Cheng Chi. She's a senior. And are you there? Is she there?
Hello. Hello, Mr. Carroll. Nice to meet
Hello.
you.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. So my question is, do you have suggestions for preparing an audition or learning excerpts?
Yeah. Don't wait for the audition. If you want to play in an orchestra, you need to learn the bulk of the repertoire now so that when an audition comes out, you basically have it down. There's just maybe a snare drum piece that is new, or a xylophone piece that's new, or a vibe piece that they're asking for. So do all of your work ahead of time. And if you notice, there are hardly any auditions going on now because of COVID. I think that's actually not a bad thing because once things get turned around, there's going to be lots of auditions, and those that have prepared and prepared well are going to have all of these opportunities. So, how to prepare your audition? Like I say, get the bulk of the list. Know all the standard rep, the Scheherazads, the Quiches, the Porgies, the Appalachian Spring, the Dukas, etc. Get that stuff down now so that when the list comes out and there's anything that's different, you can actually work on that. In the meantime, you've been just going over, just keeping everything fresh. So when the audition happens, you're not still cramming for the last week or so to learn this piece or that. I think that's probably the number one thing, along with doing mock auditions. That helps a lot. I'd say we spend a lot of time, if not all of our time, practicing by ourselves, right? I mean, how many of you are practicing with others? Probably very little percent of the time. But what do we actually do? We actually play, we perform for ourselves. Well, probably a very small amount of time. Most of the time we're playing before our teacher, before a recital, or etc. in a concert, or with an orchestra. So you need to get used to playing outside of your practice room. And that also helps with the nerves, which I think there's a question later about that. Grab some of your friends and just, when you're prepared, play for them. Anything, maybe just 5 minutes, so that you're used to playing with someone standing over your shoulder or someone looking at you, watching what you're doing. That helps to get rid of the nerves, because at auditions, you have your 7 or 8 minutes and you've got to show what you can do at that time. So learn all the music, learn it cold, do as much as you can now, and practice auditioning by actually doing some of these mock auditions.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
From that, can I just ask you, when you won the job with Los Angeles Phil, was there something in your audition that you think really gave you the edge, that put you over the top during that audition process?
Yeah, I didn't think I was going to get it, so I was very relaxed. This was my first professional audition, which is very unusual. But I think because, again, my teacher, Mitch, said, you really should do this audition. It's right here in town. You have nothing to lose. Do it. I said, okay, well, this is going to be the first time I'm doing this. So there's no way, no possible way that, I'm going to advance in this. So I went into it and just thinking, let me just play. And I was not thinking about anything. I had very little pressure on me. And after I did the first round and they said I advanced, I was like, oh, okay. So I was very surprised. So I would say I put no pressure on myself. That's really what helped me a lot.
That's great. That's great. Thanks. All right. Your next question comes from Sophia Suante, and she's a senior here. Sophia, are you there somewhere?
Yes, sir. Hello.
Hey.
Hi, Raynor Carroll. It's really great to meet you. I also have a triangle background and your triangle book.
Very nice.
That would be funny.
Wow, what size triangle is that behind you? Wow,
I
huge.
believe
It's one of those. It's one of those ranch triangles that you call everybody to dinner to.
All right. So my question is about your childhood. So I was wondering, do you think having music in your life when you were growing up gave you an advantage which led to your career? And I was wondering if you were attracted to orchestral recordings early on because you knew already right when you started college that you wanted to do orchestral studying. So
Yes, very good question. And I definitely think having music in my house at home all the time, and it was diverse music. It wasn't just classical. It was also jazz, pop, R&B. There was just always music in the house. But when it came time to start studying, I knew Scheherazade. I knew, the Tchaikovsky pieces. I knew Bolero because I'd heard them all before. I didn't know that this snare drum part was hard. I just, that I was told later, and once I started playing it. But, I think it helped a lot because the music was just in me already. So I wasn't particularly attracted to the recordings or orchestral playing when I was listening to all of it, but I think eventually that had a big influence on me. And I will say in high school, the LA Phil came and did an assembly. And, amongst the section was Bill Kraft playing timpani and my teacher playing percussion, Mitchell Peters. And, them coming to my high school and playing a concert, it was very influential on me. And I said, you know what? Not only do I think I can do that, I want to do that now. It looks like something that would be fun to do. So that influenced me a great deal, along with, I give credit to my dad who played all these different recordings when I was growing up in the house. So great question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Was your dad a performing musician?
No, he wasn't. He sang in the church choir. My mom played piano organ in the church, not together, separately. My mom's from Jamaica, so she did her thing there. And Dad sang in the choir here in the States. And my mom could read music and actually read very well, and started me on piano eventually. But they were not professional musicians, so it was just having music, and music was just an important part of our lives.
All right. Well, our next questionnaire is Michael Rogers, who's a senior, and he's been doing a little bit of auditioning himself. Michael, you're there, I think. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, Mr. Carroll. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you, Michael.
You had kind of touched on techniques for like playing in front of people in mock auditions, so I can kind of rearrange the question a little bit.
Sure.
Since people aren't all just able to take all of the pressure off themselves like that,
Right.
Taught for such a long period of time, what are some techniques that you've seen that worked and some that didn't? Like, I know that you had worked with Matt Howard right before he had won too, and so I'm just curious what things you've seen work and don't work.
Yeah. One thing that to me seems very basic, but I think perhaps a lot of us have done it, is don't repeat mistakes. You're practicing and you're making a mistake, hitting the wrong note or whatever. Don't do it again. The more you repeat that and you're making the mistakes, you're actually practicing to make mistakes. And that's going to be your norm and your regular style and mode of playing. If you're making a mistake, stop, break it down, figure out what's going on. And I like to use 3 basic things. Number 1, when you're starting to learn, let's say an excerpt, start at mezzo forte. Let's just, use whatever for example. Don't play it really soft, don't play it really loud, play it at a comfortable dynamic. That makes it easier. Number 2, equally important, play it slowly. And that's, I think, is what gets a lot of us, because we want to play it now at the right tempo, but that's not the way you learn. It takes doing it slowly, repeating it correctly. Your mind is able to absorb what your hands are doing, and gradually over time, build it up. And the third factor I would say is what I say, break it down to the bone. So, for instance, if you're playing a snare drum part that has a lot of grace notes or rolls, take out the grace notes, take out the rolls, break it down to its essence, its bare essence. And again, playing it mezzo forte and slowly, and gradually build these things back into the excerpt or the piece or the passage you're playing. That usually does it. And if you're progressing and you're doing it faster and it's successful, but at some point you're making mistakes again, usually that means just slow it back down. The thing you want to do is you want to repeat success over and over and over. And number 1, you're playing it correctly, but number 2, it creates a positive state of mind. So when you have to play it for your teacher, you're already set up. You've done it very well a number of times. Not well, yeah, I did it once in the practice room right before my lesson. You're probably not going to be successful at that. But if you repeat it over and over correctly, it's going to be more ingrained into what you're doing. So I think that makes a big difference in your practicing.
So sorry to kind of go off that a little bit. So say your process is going really well.
Yeah.
You have like a week before, do you just do mocks every day and you don't really practice it as much because it's going pretty well for you, kind of a thing? You don't want to like start messing with your process a little bit too much.
Right, right. Just be careful how much you're doing a week before. You don't want to overdo it a week before either. You don't want to get to the audition and basically fatigued, whether it's physically or mentally or both. So a week, I would say maybe 2 weeks before, you're just running through most of it, if not all of it, not every day, but you've got it charted out and you're doing it on a regular basis. But you don't want to be fixing things ideally the last couple of weeks. You just want to go through it, because again, at the audition, you're not going to be able to typically stop and do things 2 or 3 times. Maybe they'll let you do it a second time, but typically they want to hear you do it, and they're not looking for you to play it perfect necessarily. Almost nobody plays everything perfect. So it's human to make mistakes, but you have to learn from what you do. If you play it a second time, ideally they like for it to be better. It shouldn't go downhill ideally, But at an audition, I would like to think that you do things a notch or two slower to give yourself some comfort for the anxiety you're going to have. So if you want to play Porgy 120, I would say at the audition, think more 116. Those 4 clicks are not going to make a big difference. Plus, if they really, really thought it was too slow, they'll say, great, can you do it a little faster? If they have the time, they'll let you do that again. Very good question, though.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
I know you've sat in on some auditions for the orchestra over the years, and maybe others as well. Is there anything that comes out of the first round behind a screen that, again, makes it special? I think sometimes people are looking to really know what's going to make them present more magically than maybe some of the others. And that may be a weird question, I don't know, but is there anything that comes to your mind?
You're talking specifically about the screen or just in general?
Well, let's just say that it's a first round. And
Yeah.
trying to judge, and of course, a lot of it's just mathematics. If they play the right notes, they're going to be doing a little better than those that don't. But is there anything that you can remember that really turns your head about a first round when you're not seeing the player? And I don't know whether LA does that behind a screen. Most groups do, but and maybe again, it's an unfair question. I don't know.
No, it's not an unfair question. And yes, the LA Phil does do the screen up until the final round, which I personally think there's no reason to pull the screen up. It should be screened all the way. But what I've noticed in, let's say, the preliminary rounds, and in these rounds, you're listening to, 70, 80, 90, 100 different players, and probably in a couple of days. It's very easy to pick out those that should go on to the next round because they're rare. That's just the way it is. After a round, we will vote, and those that receive enough votes, if there's 9 people on the panel, you need 5 votes to go on to the next round. You get enough votes, you go on to the next round. So what do I specifically hear? I would say it's a combination of technique and musicality. It's not just one or the other, because you cannot you cannot have someone that's technically excellent, proficient, but they don't play musically, in that everything is so straight and by the books. You have to have the musicality that goes along with that. And of course, musicality is a hard thing to actually nail down and for the panel to agree on, because I say if you ask 7 different instrumentalists a question, you're going to get 9 or 10 different answers because it's a subjective thing. So for me, it's, do I hear the music when they're playing? And again, that's probably hard for someone to understand what I'm saying, but I know what that means for me. When I hear someone playing Source's Apprentice, I hear the orchestra, or do I hear the glockenspiel? That's what I want, meaning that I hear the tempo, I hear how it blends in, I hear the dynamics, all of these things. Of course, it helps to have all the notes, but it's not the most important thing. If you hit an A flat instead of an A natural in the waterfall, yeah, it might stick out, but it's not going to be the thing that does not send you to the next round for me. I can't speak for everyone, but that's my take on it.
That's great. I know they really appreciate hearing that. That's great.
But still, try to hit that right note.
Yeah, it's a safe thing. If you hit the right notes, it's
Yeah.
a little safer. Yeah. So, well, that's great. All right, we have Jacob Betts, I believe, is next. And Jacob, are you there? I think I saw you.
Hello. Hi, Mr. Carroll.
Hey, Jacob.
Really such an honor to get to ask a question tonight, and thank you for spending time with us. But I'm a senior, and I just was wondering if you had any advice for someone who's about to enter the world, particularly just in I'm sorry. Professor Deane stole part of my question with his follow-up.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
But yeah, I guess if you could focus on just if you had any advice of someone who wants to pursue a career in orchestral percussion.
Yeah, that's an easy one, coming from where I've been. I think some of the terminology today would be to become a troll, as in find a mentor, find someone that's doing what you want to do, as if you want to play in an orchestra, find someone that's doing that, and then stick to them. Watch what they do, listen to what they do, ask questions. How did they come about doing what they do? Why do they do what they do? What's easy about it? What's hard about it? It's just really throw yourself into that, as in everything you do should be centered around this person, ideally, again, your mentor, that can lead you and direct you. And you can see, oh, wow, this is what the orchestra schedule's like. Oh, wow, this is what it's like to do this and that. Really immerse yourself in that life. And I would say that's the same for any profession you're looking into, whether you want to become a teacher, find someone that's teaching, and go out and teach yourself. Volunteer and do that. So for what you need for orchestral experience, obviously having a mentor, but also play in orchestras. If you want to be in a jazz band, play in jazz bands. Do as much of that as possible. That's where you get the hands-on experience, excuse me, which is very important, because you can do all the practicing at home, etc., and study and take lessons and be an excellent student, but you need to be in an orchestra and play Scheherazade and play Porgy and Bess and play the Bartok on timpani, etc. You need to do that. So I would say, and always immerse yourself in your focus of what you want to do.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's see. Matt Joslin, are you out there? Yes, I see you. No, actually, I don't. Wait a minute. Matt, are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Oh, okay. Michael Rogers' name is still appearing on the screen there, but that's good.
Hey, Matt.
Hi. It's an honor to be speaking with you this evening. Thank you for chatting with us.
Thank you.
I was wondering what music or instruments you've liked to play outside of the orchestral repertoire over the years.
I've always had an interest in West African drumming, and when I took my first sabbatical in the LA Phil in 1999, I was able to study West African drumming, which is the djembe, the junjun, that whole ensemble, and I've been stuck. It's been a thing I have not been able to get rid of since. Absolutely love it. And it's a great way for me to balance out what we do in an orchestra with this worldly ethnic style of playing where, you know, you don't open a book, you don't go and take a formal lesson. It's all about what you hear and what you see. So I have found it so enlightening and so helpful in just becoming, for me, becoming a more of a complete musician, percussionist, drummer, everything in studying the West African drumming. And of course, what goes along with that, I had to be very careful with the timing of what I was doing. Let's say, again, the orchestra was doing Bolero the next week. I probably was not doing much hand drumming the previous week because, as you probably know, the sensitivity you need for the opening 5 minutes of Bolero is very critical. So I paced myself with that. But whenever possible, and to this day, minus COVID, so up until a year ago, I had workshops here at the house because, I just couldn't get enough. Had invite friends over, drummers, non-percussionists, flutists, violinists, yes, even those people came to the house, and it wasn't a jam session. We do authentic rhythms that I'd heard and seen on the internet, and just have fun doing that. So that's been my joy and my pleasure outside of the orchestral percussion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Let's see. We have a question from Graham Viegut. Graham, are you there?
Hello, Mr. Carroll.
Hey.
We use your books every day, so it's an honor to be able to speak with you and ask a question now.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So my question is, both on stage and off stage, what are some of the greatest challenges for you as a principal percussionist of the LA Phil when you were on the job?
Yeah, that's a great question that I think I can answer it better now than when I was playing with the orchestra. And it is the schedule. The schedule itself, I would say, was the biggest challenge I had because we were so busy. So let me give you a typical week in the Philharmonic, per se. Monday probably was a day off if you weren't doing a part of the new music groups series, which I almost always did. But if I wasn't, or there was no new music group rehearsal, we had Mondays off, which for me was a day that I could do some teaching and also do some preparation for what I needed to do for the orchestra. Not this week, because if I started Monday, it'd be too late, but maybe the next week or a couple weeks later. Tuesday, we always had a 10 to 12:30 rehearsal. Afternoon is off. Typically, I would probably do some teaching on Tuesday too. Wednesday, we'd have a double rehearsal from 10:30 to 4. Cover the complete program. And then Thursday typically was the dress rehearsal in the morning, 10 to 12:30. And then in the evening, whether it's 7:30 or 8, we'd have a performance, the first performance. Friday, we might have a rehearsal in the morning for a kids concert, children's concert we might do on Saturday. Sometimes we had Friday mornings off, but then we would have a Friday concert in the evening of the same program from Thursday. Saturday, we could have that children's concert in the morning at 10, and then come back in the evening for a repeat performance of the program that week. Sunday, we might have a rehearsal for the following week, and then a Sunday matinee at 2:30. So basically that was the schedule, and then Monday, you repeat the whole schedule again. So that's the winter season. In the summer, it was a little bit more busy. The summer, if you have the patience to hear, we'd have perhaps a Monday morning rehearsal, go home, and then a Monday evening rehearsal at the Bowl, Hollywood Bowl. Tuesday would be the dress rehearsal of program number 1, 9:30 to 12:30, and then the evening concert would be that program. Wednesday, we'd have a rehearsal for program number 2 in the morning. Thursday would be the dress rehearsal for program number 2. Thursday night would be the performance of program number 2. Friday would be the only rehearsal for program number 3, usually more of a pops oriented program. Friday night would be the performance, Saturday night, repeat performance. Sunday, sometimes it would be a separate performance, and or that's our one day off in the summer. So in the winter season, we basically did one program a week. In the summer, we did 2, if not 3 programs every week. If you look, for me, looking back at that, I'm amazed at how much repertoire we did, whether it's over a month or just a week at the Hollywood Bowl. And, you know, we did all the standard repertoire, the Scheherazade's, etc., the Tchaikovsky 1812s, Beethoven symphonies. But, you know, they throw in some pop pieces at the Bowl and or contemporary music at Disney Hall. So it's by necessity, I feel. You need to be organized. You need to be prepared. You have to look ahead. We cannot go to rehearsal as soloists. Percussionists, we're all soloists. We cannot go to rehearsal not having learned our part, because everyone will know that you don't know your part. As different from a violin or the string players, and you know, they'll probably yell at me for saying this, but we need to be even more prepared, because there's 16 first fiddles, you know, 14 second fiddles. If one of them's not quite prepared, it's not that noticeable, but we do need to be prepared. So I would say having to go through that much literature, that much, so often, every week, it's forced to be organized. Otherwise, you don't last. You don't survive. You will not survive a schedule like that. So I hope that pretty much answers your question. I would say that would have been perhaps the most challenging part of it. And then along with being principal, you have all of these duties amongst just playing your part. That's just one of them. You know, you've got to get the music ahead of time, and you've got to assign all the parts. You take the parts to the library, have them copied, and whatever that has to be done. I have to make a chart for the stage managers to have the proper equipment on stage. You have to keep an inventory of all the instruments. You have to rent instruments as needed, buy instruments as needed. When the orchestra is on tour, you have to make sure everything has its proper trunk for it, et cetera, et cetera. So principal percussion is very much an administrative position besides the playing part, which I think a lot of us don't realize that till you're stuck with that situation and you have to do that and divvy out the parts and hire the extra players and et cetera, et cetera. But I must say, I loved it. I love the job. I love doing puzzles. I love putting together, okay, I've got this stack of music for John Williams we're doing this weekend. 15 pieces, literally. I've got to look at each piece, map it out, make sure we have all the instruments in the right position on stage, et cetera, et cetera. I actually enjoyed doing that. So I think I was fit for that part of the position. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, for sure. And then actually following up on some things we talked about earlier. So say you win a job, what should we do before that, like first rehearsal or first concert series with the orchestra? What should we know before we actually go in and play professionally?
They will definitely give you an orientation. You will most likely meet with the personnel manager. You will meet with the other members, the existing members of the section, and they'll talk about the logistics and what needs to happen and what's expected of you, whether you're a principal or a section player. I think that would be pretty much a standard thing to do. The new person coming in, these expectations would be laid out for you, and then it would take you a while to get into the routine. But yeah.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Great question.
So, and the book and the name of the book, I own it. I use it all the time. Your book that outlines the distribution of percussion parts in the repertoire, the rather
right.
Tone. What is the name of the book?
I think Symphonic Repertoire for Percussion.
Yeah.
As I recall.
Such a helpful thing to have. Oh my gosh, I've referenced it so many times.
Thank you.
Have you kept your files on your schematic for stage settings for concerts and any distribution of parts that aren't in your book over the years? Maybe a volume 2?
I have kept the stage setups. I have not thought of publishing that. You're the first person I think that's mentioned that. I mean, it's a possibility. To me, well, have to have you see them, but the assistant personnel manager who did our new music groups, when I first joined the orchestra, they would actually do a small outline of the percussion. And of course, for a new music group, it's pretty detailed because, it's percussionists used extensively in new music. So this person would make these sketches and I would see them, every here and there. And I think at the end of a season or two, I would say, man, you should put those all together and have a montage, a collage, and just put it up. Because I look at a lot of things as art and say it would be so interesting to see that. So anyway, what I'm saying is if I put mine together, it'd be more of an art book, I think. But if it's helpful for others, that would serve a purpose too, But no, I have not kept up on the assignment since I retired. I leave that to Matt. And one of the first things I did was I handed him a copy of my book. They should actually have already had a copy there too. So he's fine. He's fine with the assignments, and yeah.
So helpful because in the hinterlands outside of such a central orchestra, a lot of times the resources are not always available, and your book even has some possible substitutions of numbers and things like that. Really, really, really helpful, and everybody should buy this book. So that's good.
I appreciate that, Chris. I have to say, when the book first came out and I was at PASIC, showing the book, I'll have to say I was shocked at a few percussionists were actually surprised and disappointed that I did this, in that they were thinking, or the feeling I got from those few, and it was more than I thought. I mean, there wasn't like 20 percussionists, but there were a few that were in orchestras at the time and said, this is something personal, this is private. I have my card file at home, and I keep track of. And my reaction, that's fine, but I think this is something I would have really benefited from had it been published before. And I look at it that way. It's not something where I'm putting my name out and I'm doing this. It's also with the orchestral repertoire series. I think when we were in school, there was the Alan Abel book, and not too much else besides that. So I feel like more information is good for all of us in general. So
there's always room for more and better information, for sure.
Yeah, and there will always be those that just don't understand.
Yep. Yes, that is absolutely true. You're right. So you obviously accepted that and then let it go, because your book is really, really tremendously valuable, and anybody can change things.
Absolutely. It's a starting point.
Oh my gosh, but it's actually more than a start. Sometimes it's the answer to questions, and as you know, this is a very complicated thing that has to get done. So thank you again for that. I guess you worked closely with your librarian too.
Yep. I mean, I cannot speak enough about the relationship a principal percussion has to have with the stage manager and the librarian, both equally important. With the librarian, and that's where I get the music from. That's where I take the music to for changes, alterations. Many pieces we would get where there are 4 players, each player plays xylophone, which did not have to be that way. And the library was kind enough for me to take it to them, and I would ask them to do a cut and paste, so maybe only 1, if not 2 players played xylophone. I'm using that as an example. Sometimes they had 6 marimbas, or 6 parts written for marimba. It's not really practical, as we know, on stage. Sometimes there's barely room for 1. So that would have to be taken care of, number one, by me, directing them where to cut, where to paste, etc. And then they would have to do the physical, actual cutting and pasting. And then the stage manager, I cannot say enough. I always remember my stage managers around holidays, the Christmas time. And they're thankful, and I'm thankful for all that they do throughout the years and through the seasons of getting things on stage, getting it in the right spot. It makes all the difference. And being flexible, workable with the diagrams I would send them, et cetera, et cetera. It really means a lot in what we do, the logistical side of all of it.
Great knowledge here. Okay, we still have time, I think, for a couple of alternate questions that are on our sheet. Let's see, Hayden, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am.
Good evening, Rackley? Carroll. Is he out there? Anybody see him? I'm not hearing him.
Yeah.
There you are.
Hello?
I can't hear him. Can you hear him? Okay, good.
Can you hear me now?
Great. Well, let's just go with it then.
Am I audible?
You could bring the volume up if you could.
Here, let's try this.
I am not hearing Harry Hayden if he's speaking.
How about this? Am I good now?
It still needs to come up more if you could.
Oh. Trying to figure out where I can put this at. Okay.
Can you project, use diaphragm support?
How about this?
Can you hear it?
Yes, I hear someone. Yes.
All right. Hopefully this will be good enough. I'm sorry about this. It's never
There he is.
been an issue. All right. Well, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Well, I mean, you've had one of the most illustrious careers as a professional percussionist. So I just wanted to know, I mean, from the day you started, what is the most significant experience you've ever had? Like what capitalizes your entire career?
Yeah, very good question, Hayden. There's been so many, to be really honest with you, there's been so many, and I've learned a lot. And like I said, I think at the beginning, I have been truly blessed to do what I did and work amongst fantastic musicians. But to answer your question, to give you at least one thing, was in 1992, the Philharmonic was in residence at the Salzburg Festival in Austria. We were there for 4 weeks. And in addition to regular concerts, we did an opera called St. Francis of Assisi by Messiaen. And the opera, as I recall, is 6.5 hours with 2 intermissions. So we'd start at 4:30 and finish, I think it was 11:30 at night. That's not the hard part. The hard part is, I mean, do most of you know Messiaen and like the exotic birds, that music? It's some pretty tough stuff. And I was playing xylophone in this opera, and xylophone was placed in front of the concertmaster, right up front, right under the conductor, and Esa-Pekka Salonen was conducting. So very challenging music for the whole orchestra, a staged contemporary opera that lasted 6.5 hours. I believe we did 4 performances, and that's something I will always remember. Just the whole experience. I remember perhaps the first performance, looking out in the audience, there was Zubin Mehta, Sir George Solti. I could just go on. All of these famous conductors, not conducting, but they're sitting there looking at this performance of this piece that's not done very often because it's such a difficult and long opera. But seeing these people in the audience, these famous conductors, and the whole experience of doing that in a foreign country, and it was just a total amazing experience. And the conductor, our music director at the time, Esa-Pekka Salonen, was just an amazing, or he is an amazing conductor. He's now the music director in San Francisco. That would have to stick out as probably the most memorable experience I had in the Philharmonic, without a doubt. But like I say, there were a lot. There were a lot. But that would be the total that, lasted for, a month. It's fantastic.
Incredible.
Sweet, thank you.
Before we go on to what is our last question, I think it's pretty evident to all of these students who are good practicers. They are all dedicated people here. But when you outline the kind of weekly activities you have, there's not a significant amount of free time for you to just practice scales and do things like that. How did you cope with that? I mean, is just learning, keeping up with all the rep enough on a weekly basis without investing in your kind of basic playing as well?
Yeah, it would depend on the repertoire. If the repertoire that we were doing, let's say in the next 4 weeks, was not that challenging, let's say, Tchaikovsky Symphony, Mahler Symphony, no big deal as far as percussion goes, a standard. Yeah, I can spend time working on things that are coming down the line or whatever. But when, as I say, with the LA Phil, and we really did, and they still do, more forward-looking. They do the traditional standard repertoire, but it's almost always mixed with John Adams, whoever is the new person, the Burt Whistle of Europe. I don't know if you know of that. Difficult writing. So you really have to stay on top of it for that, but it would depend on the schedule. Sometimes it was very tight. I got some playing done in my teaching, but I am one. My style is I don't like students to copy me, so I don't do a lot of playing in my teaching. I like to express how I'd like to have them play it. If I see there's an issue, then I will play, because as we know, as players and teachers, every student learns differently, and some of them just don't get it when you play it. When you explain it or they read it, they need to see visually how it's done. So, but anyway, to answer your question, it kind of depended on what was happening with it. My life was the Philharmonic, basically. I had very little social life, I'll say that. Some players can have more of a social life. They're probably not principal, but maybe they were. But for me, because it was so all-encompassing, and it's something I was definitely into. It's not that it's not what I wanted to do, but I often said my weekend starts on Sunday night, because Sunday night we're off, Monday we're typically off, so that's my weekend. That's my Saturday, Sunday, Monday. But you adjust, and it's a good thing to adjust to. It was a great job, so I was very fortunate. I will always say that. Difficult, can be very difficult at times, lots of demands, crazy things were, again, I remember doing the premiere of the John Adams City Noir. Backstage is covered with percussion. That was one thing. And then I don't know if you've seen it, it's now looped around an audition list. That vibraphone part, I'll take credit for doing the premiere of that vibraphone part. Pretty crazy part. But yeah, it's a great experience. I love doing it. I love doing all that, meeting those challenges every night. Chris, you're muted.
Sorry.
There you go. There you go.
Yep. So we have one more question from Yun-Chen Chu, who is a junior. And let's see, are you there? Yes, I see you. Okay, so she'll be ready to ask.
Hello, Mr. Carroll.
Hello.
Thank you for being here tonight. So my question was,
is there a recording of you playing with the LA Phil that you are particularly proud of? Or maybe there's a few that you like?
Thank you for a very, very good question. Is there one? Yeah, I would say there is one that comes to mind. And of course, it's not going to be a Bruckner symphony because there's hardly any, if any, percussion on Bruckner symphony that we've recorded. But it would be the Revueltas album or recording that we did, I think it was the late 90s, which included the La Noche de los Mayas, Sensa Maya, several pieces of his that, number one, the writing is fantastic. And of course, we got great playing. The percussions, I think, sounds very nice on there. Very happy with it. If you're not familiar with La Noche de los Mayas, it's a suite from a movie that Revueltas wrote the soundtrack for. And it's full of great, great percussion. And the last movement, as I recall, it's been a while now, but I recall the last movement calls for 12 players, plus timpani. So there's a lot going on. But it was fun. Conga solos, bongo, timbale solos. Even we did a bass drum solo on it. It's a great piece, and I think the recording turned out well. And I'll just give you the opposite. I'm sorry to say. Through the years that I was with the orchestra, most of those years was with Esa-Pekka Salonen, and one of his signature pieces was the Rite of Spring. We did that with him many, many times. Live performances, toured many times with that piece, which was one of the pieces that drew me to percussion. I love that piece. I've played timpani, bass drum, most often bass drum on it. So when we got to our new hall, that was one of the pieces that we did. We did an opening series of concerts. I think it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And one of those concerts, each different program featured the Rite of Spring. And subsequently, we recorded that. I don't believe it was from that series, but at some point we recorded that with Esa-Pekka. I am not happy with that recording. It's for whatever reasons, and percussion is not easy to record. So for whatever reason, the bass drum, which I played on that recording, sounds the same throughout the recording. And I can tell you that's not the way I played it. It's not even close. If I played piano, it sounded mezzo forte. If I played 3Fs, it sounded mezzo forte. Very disappointed with that recording. And that's just a lesson to be learned, that you do your best on stage, you present the sound, the performance that you're happy with. If you're fortunate, you're able to listen to playbacks. Nowadays, the orchestra records from their performances. Rarely will they do a dedicated orchestral session. When I first joined the orchestra, that's what we did. We did concerts and we went and recorded the pieces. But now, to save money in part, they record our concerts and perhaps edit them down to whatever the final product is. But either way, whether you can listen to playbacks, you really don't have much control over the sound that is on the recording. And for whatever reason, that particular time, maybe it's because it was one of the first recordings we did at Disney Hall, the sound of the bass drum, for me, was not good. So I give you my best, I think, is Revueltas, and the worst, the Rite of Spring. That we did with Esa-Pekka, which the performance is fine. It's just the way the recording came out, I'm not very happy with. But thank you for asking that question. Very good question.
So I know we are basically to the end of our list of questions. I don't mean to hog this, but you're playing with these currently with these orchestras like the Sphinx and all. Are you functioning as principal of these orchestras, or? I mean, that would be an obvious expectation.
The Sphinx, I do function as principal there. That's an orchestra that gets together once a year, made up of minority musicians. We did not get together. It would have been like 2 weeks ago that we would have gotten together and rehearsed and performed. It's usually the week before the Super Bowl, so a week ago. But due to COVID, we did not do that this year. The Shaneke Orchestra is based in London, And because I'm a little far away, but I go whenever I can, no, I'm not typically principal there because I'm not really there and be able to do the logistics. I mean, to me, it doesn't matter. I'm happy to just play section percussion. Very happy to do that and not have all those other responsibilities that go along with that. So I'm content. I'm content.
In case any of these students want to come and take lessons with you, are you still teaching?
Yes, I am. Currently, I have a couple of students that still come to the house. Wear the masks. We stay far apart. But for the most part, I'm not doing much. I will, when things get back, I will do more. I have not done any online teaching. My preference. But yeah, I'm. If anyone wants to take a lesson, I'd be more than happy to host them and give them my 2 cents.
Excellent. Professor Ford, do you have anything to add to all of this?
Well, the thing I would add is that this has been a fantastic discussion, and Raynor, you have touched on so many points that I think the students needed to hear, from the musicianship, the technical development, and also just the basic business of being in an orchestra week to week to week. Really, it's been enlightening, and you've been very articulate and inspiring. So thank you so much for your time tonight.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Excellent students, excellent questions. It's been a pleasure to sit here and converse with all of you. I'm very much jealous of the students these days. They have such fantastic teachers and such great resources to use, as opposed to the days where we had to drop the needle in the record and find where the excerpt was. And so, as I was saying before we started, to the students, please take advantage of the time you have. I understand you guys are not at home. You're able to go to school. Well, that's fantastic. Use your facilities, use your teachers. Like I said, be a troll and follow them everywhere they go. Find out what they do at night when they're not with you. Ask them questions until they shove you away. But if you want to be a successful and you want to make a career out of this, there are a lot of mediocre drummers, percussionists out there. You want to rise above. So what is it going to take to be better than most? Go the extra mile. Ask them, do this, do that. Play in as many ensembles as you can and take it all in and learn from your experiences.
Fantastic advice. Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Raynor. And I'd like to thank Professor Deane for being the MC tonight. Great job. This brings us to the end of the first half of our series. And I want to remind everybody that our second half is equally outstanding. Next week is Casey Cangliosi. And then we have Valerie Naranjo. And then finally, Tom Sharp. And this is your opportunity to get involved, to ask a question, to speak to these amazing professionals and about their careers and about their development. So remember that our questions are due on this coming Wednesday for Casey, and we hope that many of you participate. Thank you again, Raynor. Have a beautiful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bravo, Raynor.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.